Thunder crackled across the city cemetery as 8-year-old Tommy Martinez curled up beside his mother's headstone, his threadbare jacket doing little to shield him from the bitter November rain. Through chattering teeth, he whispered the same bedtime story she used to tell him about a brave little bird who lost his nest but found something even more precious, while his small fingers traced the letters of her name, not knowing that someone was watching from the shadows, someone who recognized the Martinez name etched in stone and felt their hearts stop. In the 8 months since his mother's death, Tommy had made this cold marble slab his pillow, the surrounding angels his guardians, and the stars above his nightlight. The social workers hadn't found him yet, and he intended to keep it that way. What he didn't know was that his nightly vigils were about to unlock a door to his past that would change everything. The cemetery keeper had seen many mourners in his 30 years of service, but never a child who came so faithfully, rain or shine, to sleep beside a grave. It wasn't just the boy's dedication that caught his attention. It was the name on the headstone that made him reach for his phone that stormy night, his fingers trembling as he dialed a number he had been given years ago with strict instructions to call if anyone ever came looking for Maria Martinez. Elena Reyes had seen her share of strange cases in 15 years as a private investigator, but nothing quite like this. The cemetery keeper's voice on the phone had trembled with urgency, and now, sitting in her parked car outside the iron gates of Oak Hill Cemetery, she understood why. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she watched the small figure huddled against a marble headstone, his dark hair plastered to his forehead by the relentless downpour. The name Martinez had haunted her for years. Back in 2016, she'd been hired to track down Maria Martinez, the rebellious daughter of one of Texas's most prominent families. The case had led her through a maze of family secrets, corporate intrigue, and ultimately, heartbreak. She'd found Maria, yes, but what she discovered had made her question everything about the assignment. Maria had been different from the spoiled heiress Elena had expected to find. Instead, she discovered a young woman working double shifts at a local diner, her hands rough from work, but her smile genuine. Maria had been 7 months pregnant then, refusing her family's demands to return home. Some things are worth more than money, Maria had told her over coffee, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. Elena had done something unprecedented that day. She'd lied to her client. She told Ricardo Martinez Sr. that his daughter had left the country, that the trail had gone cold. The look of fierce independence in Maria's eyes had reminded Elena too much of herself at that age, of her own choices to forge a path away from family expectations. Now, 8 years later, fate had brought her full circle. The boy couldn't be more than 8 years old. The timing matched perfectly. Elena pulled her coat tighter and reached for her umbrella, knowing she couldn't leave him out there another night. But approaching a street-smart kid required delicacy. One wrong move, and he'd disappear into the shadows of the city. She watched him for another hour, her heart aching as he pulled a worn backpack closer, using it as a makeshift pillow. The boy was clearly used to this routine, evidence of too many nights spent sleeping rough. His movements had the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to survive on their own. Yet there was something deeply wrong about seeing such adult behavior in a child so young. Through her car window, Elena could make out other details that spoke volumes. The boy's clothes were clean but worn, suggesting he was still attending school somewhere. A smart survival tactic. Staying in school meant access to bathrooms, food, and warmth during the day. The way he positioned himself at the grave showed both devotion and strategic thinking. He was partially hidden from the main path, but had clear sight lines in all directions. Elena had done enough surveillance work to recognize the signs of someone who knew how to stay hidden while keeping watch. This kid had street smarts that both impressed and saddened her. No child should need to develop such survival skills. As midnight approached, she made her decision. Tomorrow she would begin building a case file. She needed to understand what had happened to Maria, how her son had ended up sleeping in a graveyard, and, most importantly, why one of the wealthiest families in Texas had a grandson living like a homeless child. But first, she had to gain his trust. Eleanor reached into her glove compartment and pulled out her business card, turning it over in her hands. On the back, she wrote a simple message: "Your mother helped me once. Let me return the favor." Below it, she added the address of Sophie's diner, the same place where she'd first met Maria all those years ago. She stepped out into the rain, her shoes crunching softly on the gravel path. The boy's head snapped up at the sound, his body tensing like a cornered animal ready to bolt. Elena stopped at a respectful distance, placed the card and a $20 bill beneath a small rock near the grave's edge, then retreated without a word. From her car, she watched him wait 5 full minutes before carefully retrieving the card. Smart kid. In the beam of the security lights, she saw his face clearly for the first time. Maria's eyes stared back at her from that small face, filled with the same fierce determination she remembered. Morning light filtered through the dusty blinds of Elena's office as she spread her research across her desk. Maria Martinez's death certificate lay at the center. Cause of death: complications from pneumonia. No insurance. No next of kin listed except for an 8-year-old son, Thomas Ricardo Martinez. The boy had slipped through the cracks of the system somehow, and Elena suspected it wasn't entirely by accident. She pulled up the Martinez family files on her computer, photographs of their sprawling ranch estate in hill country filling her screen. Ricardo Martinez Sr. had built his fortune in Texas oil, but it was his real estate investments that had made the family name synonymous with power. The Martinez Towers dominated the Austin skyline, their name spelled out in gleaming letters against the Texas sky. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she dug deeper. Maria's disappearance had made headlines 8 years ago. The rebellious heiress who'd walked away from a billion-dollar fortune. But the press had gotten it wrong. The photos Elena had taken during her investigation told a different story. Maria, working late shifts at the diner, her pregnant belly hidden beneath a loose apron, her smile genuine as she served coffee to truckers and night shift workers. Elena opened her bottom drawer, pulling out a thick manila envelope marked Martinez 2016. Inside were the photos she'd never shared with her client, the ones that had made her choose conscience over contract. Maria sitting in a small apartment, painting beautiful landscapes on salvaged canvas. Maria teaching art to children at a community center. Maria radiant with pregnancy, creating a life far from the gilded cage of her family's expectations. The sound of her office door opening made Elena look up. Her assistant, Jake, stood there with fresh coffee and a concerned expression. "You've been here all night, haven't you?" Elena accepted the coffee gratefully. The boys' school records show perfect attendance at Henderson Elementary. Straight, as glowing teacher comments, not a single red flag. He's either incredibly resilient or someone's been helping him. Jake leaned against her desk, scanning the documents. "You think the old man knows about him? Ricardo Martinez Sr.? No. If he knew he had a grandson sleeping in a cemetery." Elena shook her head. For all his faults, family means everything to him. That's what made Maria's leaving so explosive. She pulled up another document, a trust fund agreement. Maria was set to inherit $50 million on her 30th birthday. No conditions, no strings attached. She would have turned 30 next month. You think that's connected to her death? Elena stared at the death certificate again. Pneumonia doesn't just happen to healthy 29-year-olds, not in this day and age, not without underlying factors. Maria was living in poverty while sitting on a fortune she could have claimed in just a few more months. The pieces weren't fitting together. Elena pulled up property records, medical records, anything that might shed light on Maria's final months. A pattern began to emerge, a systematic withdrawal from the world. Changed addresses, disconnected phones, closed bank accounts. It was as if Maria had been running from something or someone. Jake, I need you to do a deep dive on the Martinez family's business dealings from 2016. Focus on any projects that were controversial or got suddenly canceled around the time Maria left. Her assistant nodded, already reaching for his laptop. What about the boy? You said you left him your card last night. Elena glanced at her watch. 9:30 a.m. Sophie's Diner opens at 10. If he's half as smart as I think he is, he'll show up. Kids like Tommy, they survive by gathering information. Right now, I'm a mystery he needs to solve. She gathered her coat and car keys, pausing at the door. One more thing, Jake. See what you can find out about Tommy's father. Maria never told me who he was, and it's not listed on the birth certificate in all my surveillance photos from back. Then, she was always alone. As Elena drove through morning traffic toward Sophie's Diner, her mind kept returning to the image of Tommy at his mother's grave. There was something about the way he carried himself, a familiar set to his jaw that tickled at her memory. She'd seen that same look of quiet determination somewhere before, but not on Maria's face. The diner looked exactly as it had 8 years ago. Same cracked vinyl booths, same neon sign, flickering in the window. Elena chose a booth with a clear view of both entrances and settled in to wait. She ordered coffee and a plate of chocolate chip pancakes, remembering how Maria used to sneak extra chocolate chips to her favorite customers. Tommy stood across the street from Sophie's Diner for 20 minutes, studying the entrance and everyone who went in or out. His mother had taught him to be careful, to watch and wait before making any moves. The woman from the cemetery sat in a booth by the window, and something about her seemed familiar, like a face from a dream he couldn't quite remember. The $20 she'd left burned in his pocket. He hadn't spent it yet, though his stomach growled at the smell of bacon and coffee wafting from the diner. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, but curiosity gnawed at him harder than hunger. How had this stranger known his mother? Taking a deep breath, Tommy crossed the street. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and he immediately cataloged the exits. Front door, kitchen door, probably a back entrance through the alley. Old habits died hard. "You're exactly on time," Elena said as he approached her booth. "Your mother used to say being punctual was a sign of respect." Tommy slid into the seat opposite her, his backpack clutched tight against his chest. "How did you know her?" Elena gestured to the plate of chocolate chip pancakes she'd ordered. These were her specialty, extra chocolate chips, shaped like a smiley face. She said food always tastes better when it makes you smile. Tommy's throat tightened. He remembered those pancakes, remembered Sunday mornings with his mom dancing in their tiny kitchen, the radio playing old songs while she created breakfast masterpieces. "You were a customer?" "I was more than that." Elena's voice softened. "I was the last person your mother trusted with her secrets before you were born, and now I think it's time those secrets came to light." A waitress approached, and Tommy tensed, but Elena smoothly ordered a second plate of pancakes and hot chocolate without drawing attention to him. Her eyes were kind but sharp, missing nothing. "You go to Henderson Elementary," she said once the waitress left. Not a question. 4th grade, Mrs. Thompson's class. Perfect attendance. Tommy's hands clenched under the table. "You've been checking up on me? It's my job. I'm a private investigator. 8 years ago, your grandfather hired me to find your mother." She watched his reaction carefully. "But when I found her, I chose to help her hide instead." The hot chocolate arrived, topped with whipped cream and chocolate sprinkles. Tommy wrapped his cold hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into his fingers. "Mom never talked about her family, just said they were gone, like my dad." "She was protecting you?" Elena leaned forward. "Tommy, what happened to your mother? I don't think it was just pneumonia. The timing, the circumstances, something doesn't add up. But I can't investigate properly if I'm worried about you sleeping in a graveyard every night." Tommy's face hardened. "I'm not going into foster care. I promised Mom I'd stay in school, stay out of trouble, and I have. I'm doing fine." "You're surviving," Elena corrected gently. "But your mother wanted more than survival for you. She wanted you to thrive." She pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. "This was her 8 years ago, right here in this diner." Tommy's hands trembled as he picked up the photo. His mother looked younger, her face glowing as she rested one hand on her pregnant belly. She was wearing a waitress uniform, caught mid-laugh as she served coffee. I've never seen this picture. She was running from a life of wealth and privilege because she wanted to be free to make her own choices, to raise you away from the complications of the Martinez family name. Elena paused. But now you're sleeping next to her grave, while your grandfather lives in a mansion 20 miles away. The pancakes arrived, but Tommy barely noticed them. What do you want from me? I want to help you understand who you are and what really happened to your mother. But first, I want you to be safe. Elena pulled out a key and placed it next to his plate. I have a spare room. Clean bed, hot shower, no questions asked. You can leave any time you want. Tommy stared at the key, then at the photograph of his mother. Why should I trust you? Because your mother did, and because I've spent the last 8 years regretting that I didn't do more to help her. Elena's voice cracked slightly. I'm not asking you to trust me forever, Tommy. Just for one night. One night where you don't have to be so strong all by yourself. Outside, rain began to fall again, drumming against the diner's windows. Tommy thought about the cold marble waiting for him at the cemetery, about his mother's voice in his dreams telling him to be brave, but also to be smart. He picked up his fork and cut into the pancakes, shaped just like his mother used to make them. Ricardo Martinez Sr. stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the Austin sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold. At 72, he still arrived at work before dawn, a habit formed during the lean years when he'd built his empire from nothing. The Martinez Energy logo glowed 40 stories below, a reminder of everything he'd achieved and everything he'd lost. His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. Sir, Elena Reyes is here to see you. Ricardo's hands tightened on his coffee cup. That name brought back memories of his darkest day, when he'd learned his only daughter had vanished. Send her in. Elena entered with the same quiet confidence he remembered, but there was something different in her eyes today. She carried a manila envelope that made his chest tighten with anticipation. Mr. Martinez, she said, declining his gesture toward a chair. 8 years ago, I lied to you. The coffee cup clattered against its saucer. About Maria? Yes. Elena placed a photograph on his desk. Maria, in a diner uniform, pregnant and smiling. I found her. She asked me not to tell you, and I honored that request. But circumstances have changed. Ricardo sank into his chair, his fingers trembling as they reached for the photo. She was pregnant? His voice cracked. I had a grandchild? Have, Elena corrected quietly. You have a grandson. His name is Tommy. He's 8 years old, brilliant, and until yesterday he was sleeping beside his mother's grave because she died 8 months ago. The color drained from Ricardo's face. Maria is dead? He pressed a button on his desk. Cancel my meetings. All of them. His eyes never left the photograph. Tell me everything. Elena remained standing. Before I do, I need your word that you'll listen completely before taking any action. Tommy is not a possession to be claimed, Mr. Martinez. He's a child who survived trauma and loss. He needs understanding, not control. Ricardo's jaw tightened at her tone, but he nodded. The old Ricardo would have bristled at being spoken to this way, but loss had taught him hard lessons about pride. Maria died of pneumonia, but the circumstances are suspicious. She was living in poverty despite having a trust fund that would have matured next month. Tommy has been attending school, maintaining perfect grades, while essentially living homeless. He's got your determination, Mr. Martinez, and Maria's heart. Elena placed more photos on the desk. Tommy at school, Tommy at his mother's grave, Tommy in the diner yesterday. Ricardo's hands shook as he examined each one, seeing traces of Maria in every image. He has her eyes, he whispered, and your stubborn chin, Elena added. But he also has secrets. Maria was running from something or someone. The timing of her death, just months before she could claim her trust fund, isn't sitting right with me. Ricardo stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Where is he now? Safe. Getting some real sleep for the first time in months. Elena's voice hardened. "And that's where he'll stay. Until I'm convinced he won't be used as a pawn in whatever game." "Got his mother killed." Ricardo turned, anger flashing in his eyes. "You dare suggest—" "I dare because Maria trusted me to protect her son. Something made her run from all this." Elena gestured at the opulent office. "Something made her choose poverty over privilege. Before Tommy becomes part of this world, we need to understand why." The old man's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly ancient, the weight of regret visible in every line of his face. "The day Maria left, we had a fight. She'd discovered something in the company files, irregularities in some land deals. She threatened to go public if I didn't make it right. He swallowed hard. I told her she was being naive. That business was more complicated than her. Idealistic notions of right and wrong. The next day, she was gone." Elena pulled out her notebook. "What kind of irregularities?" "Property acquisitions in East Austin. Local families being pressured to sell below market value. I didn't handle the deals directly. That was Charles, my nephew. He was rising in the company then." Ricardo's face darkened. "After Maria left, I had our lawyers review everything. They found nothing illegal, but Maria found something worth running from," Elena finished. "And now she's dead. And your nephew Charles is the heir apparent to Martinez Energy." Ricardo moved to his desk, pressed another button. "Get me every file we have on the East Austin acquisitions from 2016. Every document, every email." He looked at Elena. "How do I make this right?" "First, we find the truth. Then we let Tommy decide what role, if any, he wants in your world." Elena headed for the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. "One more thing, Mr. Martinez. Tommy doesn't know I'm here. When he's ready to meet you, it'll be his choice. Not yours, not mine. His." After she left, Ricardo stood at the window for a long time, holding the photo of his pregnant daughter. In the distance, storm clouds gathered over Austin, promising another day of rain. Elena's spare room wasn't much, but to Tommy, it felt like a luxury hotel. He sat on the edge of the real bed, his first in months, and pulled out his mother's leather-bound journal from his backpack. He'd read it so many times, the pages were worn at the edges, but today, with everything Elena had told him, the words seemed to hold new meaning. "My dearest Tommy," the first page began, "if you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to protect you. But there are things you need to know, truths I've kept hidden to keep you safe." The sound of Elena moving around in the kitchen gave him pause. His mother had written about her. The investigator with kind eyes who chose conscience over cash. But there were other names in the journal that made his heart race. Charles Martinez, the cousin who'd offered to help with her trust fund. Richard Kane, the lawyer who had warned her about the documents. And always, always, her father's shadow, looming over everything. A knock at his door made him jump. Elena stood there with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Your mother used to say that chocolate helps difficult conversations," she said, offering him a mug. "Want to tell me about that journal?" Tommy hesitated, then nodded. Elena sat in the room's only chair while he stayed perched on the bed. "Mom wrote it the year before she got sick. She said it was insurance in case anything happened to her." "May I?" Elena held out her hand. Tommy passed her the journal, watching carefully as she handled it with reverence. "July 15th, 2023, Elena read aloud. Tommy drew another picture today, the skyline of Austin at sunset. He has such talent, just like Richard always did. Sometimes I see his father in the way Tommy tilts his head when he's concentrating, in the careful precision of his lines. But he can never know. That truth would put him in too much danger." Tommy's breath caught. "You knew my father?" Elena shook her head slowly. "Your mother never told me, but this journal." She flipped through pages, scanning quickly. "She's left us breadcrumbs, Tommy. Look at this entry. Richard's warning was right. The documents show everything, the forced evictions, the mysterious fires, the threatening letters. Charles thinks money can silence conscience, but some debts can't be paid with cash." "There's more," Tommy said quietly. He reached for the journal, turning to a dog-eared page. This is from right before she got sick. Charles came to the diner today, said Dad's health was failing, that the trust fund could be mine early if I just signed some papers. But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and I remembered the look he had that night in the office when he found me with the files. Elena leaned forward. Tommy, what files was she talking about? I don't know exactly, but she kept a USB drive. With her always. After she died, I couldn't find it. His voice cracked. The police said our apartment had been robbed, but Mom only had one valuable thing, that drive. When exactly did she get sick? Elena pulled out her phone, checking dates. It was weird, she seemed fine. Then, after Charles visited, she started getting these bad headaches. The doctor said it was stress, gave her some pills. Tommy's fingers tightened on the journal. 2 weeks later, she couldn't breathe right. The hospital said it was pneumonia, but she kept saying something was wrong, that it didn't feel right. Elena's face had gone pale. The trust fund would have been yours if she died before claiming it, basic inheritance law. But if she'd lived to sign it over, she could have exposed whatever was on that drive, Tommy finished. He'd spent months putting these pieces together, but saying it out loud made it real in a way that scared him. Tommy, this journal, it's evidence. Your mother was leaving a trail, protecting you the only way she could. Elena stood up, pacing. We need to find that drive, but Charles has probably destroyed it by now. Elena smiled grimly. Maybe not. Your mother was clever. In her last entry, she wrote about hiding the truth where it all began. Any idea what that means? Tommy's eyes widened. The night she got really sick, she made me promise to keep visiting her grave. Said it was important that I never forget where I came from. He pulled something from his pocket, a small key on a silver chain. She gave me this, said when the time was right, I'd know what it opened. Elena examined the key. It wasn't a house key or a safety deposit box key. It looked older, possibly to a filing cabinet or a desk drawer. Tomorrow, she said, we're going to visit Martinez Energy's old office building. Your mother worked there one summer as an intern in the records department. You think? I think your mother knew exactly what she was doing, and I think it's time we finished what she started. Elena stood up. But first, you need real sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As Tommy lay down in the soft bed, his mother's journal clutched to his chest. He whispered the same words she used to say every night. The truth always finds its way to the light, my brave boy, always. Outside his window, the Austin skyline glittered like stars fallen to earth, the Martinez Energy building standing tall among them, holding secrets that had cost his mother her life. Morning sunlight streamed through Elena's kitchen window as Tommy sat at her small table, carefully unpacking his backpack. 8 months of living rough had taught him to keep his possessions minimal and precious. Each item emerged like a treasure. His mother's paintbrushes wrapped in an old silk scarf, a sketchbook half filled with drawings, 3 worn paperback books, and a small wooden box containing colored pencils. Elena watched from the doorway, coffee mug in hand, noting how methodically he arranged everything. You're an artist, she said softly, recognizing the quality of the brushes. Mom taught me. Tommy opened the sketchbook, revealing detailed cityscapes and portraits. She said art helps you see the truth of things, not just their surface. Moving closer, Elena studied a particular drawing, the Martinez Energy building. At night, each window meticulously rendered. This is incredible, Tommy. You've captured every detail. I can see it from the cemetery. His voice caught slightly. Mom used to tell me stories about working there before I was born. She said the old records room in the basement was like a maze of secrets. Elena set her coffee down, mind racing. The key you showed me last night, it's an old-style filing cabinet key, the kind they used to use in corporate archives. She pulled out her phone, showing Tommy a photo, like these. The image showed rows of metal filing cabinets, the kind that had been standard in offices decades ago. Tommy's eyes lit up with recognition. There's one just like that in Mom's journal. He flipped pages frantically until he found what he was looking for. A sketch in the margin showing a filing cabinet with a small star scratched into its corner. Your mother left us a map, Elena realized. All these drawings in her journal, they're not just art. They're clues. Tommy nodded eagerly. She used to say that sometimes the best way to hide something is to make it look like decoration. He turned more pages, revealing tiny sketches hidden in the margins. A basement window, a corridor with pipes overhead, a door with a specific number. Elena grabbed her laptop, pulling up the original building plans for Martinez Energy's first office. The basement level was renovated in 2015, but the old records room was preserved for historical documents. Your grandfather's quite proud of the company's history. When can we go look? Tommy asked, his hand unconsciously touching the key hanging under his shirt. Not yet, Elena cautioned. First, we need to establish your normal routine. If Charles is watching, and I'm sure he is, any sudden changes will alert him. She studied Tommy's face. When does school start? 8:30. I usually get there early to use the bathroom and clean up. His cheeks flushed slightly. Elena's heart ached at the matter-of-fact way he described his survival strategies. Okay, new plan. Normal morning routine, but this time with a hot shower and breakfast first. I'll drive you, but drop you off a block away. After school, you come straight. Here, no cemetery visits for a few days. Tommy started to protest, but Elena held up her hand. I know it's hard, but we need to be smart about this. Your mother's grave will be the first place they look when they realize you're not sleeping there anymore. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Elena moved silently to the security panel, checking the camera feed. She relaxed slightly. It's just Jake, my assistant. Jake entered, carrying a thick file and a paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries. Morning, boss. And you. Must be Tommy. He set the bag on the table. Brought breakfast. Hope you like chocolate croissants. Tommy watched Jake carefully, but the smell of fresh pastries was impossible to resist. Elena noticed how he waited for them to eat first before taking one himself. Another survival habit that made her stomach clench. What did you find? She asked Jake, who was spreading documents across the table. Charles Martinez has been busy, Jake reported, keeping his voice casual for Tommy's benefit. In the past 8 months, he's consolidated his position at Martinez Energy, bought out 3 board members, replaced them with his own people. The East Austin Development Project is moving forward again, the one that stalled when Maria left. And the trust fund? Elena pressed. Jake glanced at Tommy, then back to Elena. If Maria had claimed it, she would have had voting rights on the board, enough to block any major development decisions. Without her signature, that power transfers to Tommy on his 18th birthday. 10 years, Tommy said quietly, surprising them both with his quick calculation. That's how long they have to either control me or... He didn't finish the sentence. Elena rested her hand gently on his shoulder. That's not going to happen. Today, you're just a normal kid going to school, but your mother left us a trail of breadcrumbs and we're going to follow them, one careful step at a time. Tommy nodded, then pulled out his sketchbook and began to draw. Under his careful hands, the old records room from his mother's stories took shape, every detail preserved through a child's perfect memory and an artist's eye for truth. Jake whistled softly. Kid's got talent. He's got more than that, Elena murmured, watching Tommy work. He's got his mother's intelligence and his grandfather's determination. Charles has no idea what he's up against. Ricardo Martinez Sr. sat in his home office, surrounded by the evidence of his daughter's life and death. DNA test results lay open on his desk, confirming what his heart had already known. Tommy was his grandson. The boy's school records showed an intelligence that made his chest swell with pride, even as it ached with loss. His security team had compiled a comprehensive report on Tommy's life. Every detail twisted the knife of guilt deeper. The small apartment where Maria had raised him, the community art classes she'd taught to make ends meet, the free lunch program at Tommy's school. His daughter and grandson had lived in poverty, while he'd continued amassing billions. Sir? His head of security, David Chen, appeared in the doorway. We've finished analyzing the surveillance footage from the cemetery. Ricardo nodded heavily. Show me. The footage played on his laptop. Tommy, night after night, maintaining his vigil at Maria's grave. The boy's routine spoke of careful planning, arriving after dark, leaving before dawn, always alert, always watching, just like Maria used to be. "There's something else," David said quietly, fast-forwarding to a specific date. 2 weeks before Ms. Maria's death, this man visited her apartment. Ricardo's hands clenched as he recognized his nephew Charles on the screen. "Do we have audio?" "No, but our lip reader confirmed part of the conversation. Charles mentioned the trust fund and some documents. Ms. Maria appeared distressed after he left, and 2 weeks later, she was dead." Ricardo's voice was ice. "What did the hospital records show?" David hesitated. "That's where it gets concerning, sir. The original attending physician noted unusual symptoms, severe headaches, respiratory distress that seemed to come on too quickly for typical pneumonia. He ordered a toxicology screen, but before the results came back, the doctor was suddenly transferred to a hospital in Dallas. The new doctor signed the death certificate without waiting for the test results." Ricardo stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked his sprawling estate. "And the toxicology report? Missing from the hospital records? But we found this." David placed a photograph on the desk, Charles shaking hands with a man in a lab coat. "The timestamp showed it was taken the day Maria died." "I want that doctor found," Ricardo ordered. "And I want every piece of paper Charles has touched in the last 2 years on my desk, by morning." "Sir," David cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Our team observed Elena Reyes dropping a boy off near Henderson Elementary this morning. The child matched Tommy's description." Ricardo's reflection showed a bitter smile. "She's protecting him." "Good. Elena's right. We need to understand what Maria found before we bring Tommy into this world." He turned back to his desk, picking up a framed photo of Maria at her college graduation. "Have our lawyers begun the process?" "Yes, sir. The papers to formally recognize Tommy as your heir are being drawn up, but—" David paused. "Charles won't take this well. He spent years positioning himself as your successor." "Charles lost any right to this company the moment he visited my dying daughter." Ricardo's voice shook with barely controlled rage. "But we play this carefully. Tommy's safety comes first." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Sandra, get me Judge Williams. It's time to call in that favor." After hanging up, he addressed David again. "I want round-the-clock surveillance on Charles. Every call, every meeting, every breath he takes. And quietly reach out to our old contacts in the DA's office. If Maria found evidence of criminal activity—" "What about the boy, sir? Should we arrange protection?" Ricardo shook his head. "Elena will notice any obvious security. For now, we watch from a distance. But I want our best people ready to move at a moment's notice if Tommy's threatened." He picked up Tommy's most recent school photo, studying the familiar set of the jaw, the determined look in eyes so like Maria's. 8 years, he murmured. 8 years I could have known my grandson, could have protected them both." "Sir," David said gently, "Ms. Maria made her choice to protect her son. From what we've uncovered, she had good reason." Ricardo nodded slowly. "Yes. And now we honor that choice by finding the truth. Tommy comes into this family on his terms, not ours." He straightened, his business demeanor returning. "Have our forensic accountants focus on the East Austin development projects. If Charles was willing to kill to keep something hidden, it must be worth killing for," David finished. "I'll put our best people on it." After David left, Ricardo opened his laptop to review Tommy's school art portfolio, which his team had accessed. The boy's talent was extraordinary. Cityscapes rendered with architectural precision, portraits capturing not just faces, but souls. In every line, Ricardo saw Maria's gift for seeing beyond surfaces. One drawing made him pause. The Martinez Energy Building at night, but drawn from an unusual angle. The basement windows were depicted with particular detail, including one with a tiny star scratched in its corner. Ricardo's eyes narrowed. He'd seen that star before, years ago, when Maria had worked in the records room during her college internship. Clever, "Girl," he whispered, "you left us a map, didn't you?" He reached for his phone, then stopped. No, Elena needed to find this on her own. Any direct contact from him now could spook Tommy and destroy the fragile trail Maria had left behind. Instead, he pressed another button on his phone. "Sandra, call the board. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning, and get me everything we have on the old records room renovation from 2015. Every blueprint, every work order." The storm was coming. Ricardo could feel it in his bones. But this time he would be ready. This time he would protect what mattered most. Charles Martinez's corner office on the 39th floor offered a commanding view of Austin, but today he barely noticed it. His attention was fixed on the security footage playing on his tablet. Elena Reyes entering the building 2 days ago to meet with his uncle. The same Elena Reyes who had supposedly lost Maria's trail 8 years ago. His phone buzzed, a text from his source at Henderson Elementary. The Martinez boy hadn't slept at the cemetery last night. He was in class now, looking better rested than usual, wearing clean clothes that hadn't come from the donation bin. "Problems, cousin?" Charles looked up to find Sophia Martinez leaning against his doorframe. His cousin, another of Ricardo's nieces, had her father's talent for appearing at inconvenient moments. As the company's chief legal counsel, she had an unfortunate habit of asking the right questions at the wrong times. "Just reviewing some security protocols," he said smoothly, closing the footage. "What brings you up here?" Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Uncle Ricardo called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Something about reviewing the East Austin development contracts." She paused. "All of them, including the ones from 2016. Charles kept his face neutral, but his hand tightened on his pen. "Ancient history. Those deals are locked down, are they?" Sophia moved closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Because I just had a very interesting conversation with Judge Williams. He mentioned something about inheritance law and trust fund execution." Before Charles could respond, his computer chimed with an email notification. His blood ran cold as he read the subject line, "Notice of External Audit. All East Austin Property Acquisitions, 2015-2017. Looks like Uncle's finally taking an interest in your pet project," Sophia observed. "Strange timing, don't you think? Almost like he's looking for something specific." Charles stood abruptly. "If you'll excuse me, I have calls to make." "Of course." Sophia lingered at the door. "Oh, and Charles, I saw the cemetery surveillance photos on your desk earlier. If anything happens to that boy, there won't be a law firm in Texas that can save you." Across town, Tommy sat in his art class, losing himself in the familiar comfort of pencil and paper. He was drawing from memory. The view from his mother's old office window, every detail precise, thanks to her stories and the photographs in her journal. "That's remarkable work, Tommy." He looked up to find his art teacher, Ms. Chen, studying his drawing. There was something different about her expression today, a careful attention that made him instinctively wary. "The perspective is unusual," she continued. "Most people draw the Martinez building from street level. You've captured it from—" She paused, calculating. "About the 4th floor? 3rd, Tommy corrected automatically, then wished he hadn't. His mother had warned him about being too precise about revealing how much he noticed. Ms. Chen smiled gently. "You know, we have a special advanced art program starting next semester, full scholarship. The paperwork just came through this morning." Tommy's pencil stopped moving. In 8 months, no one at school had mentioned scholarships or special programs. Now, suddenly, "I'll think about it," he said carefully, using the neutral tone his mother had taught him. When the bell rang, Tommy packed up slowly, watching Ms. Chen from the corner of his eye. She was on the phone, speaking too quietly for him to hear. As he left the classroom, he caught a glimpse of her notebook, a phone number with the Martinez Energy prefix. Elena was waiting a block from school in her battered Honda. "How was your day?" she asked, as he slid into the passenger seat. "They're watching," Tommy said quietly. "My art teacher tried to get me into a special program. She had a Martinez Energy phone number in her notebook. Elena nodded, unsurprised. Your grandfather's people, probably. He's trying to protect you without scaring you. She glanced in the rearview mirror. The black SUV 3 cars back. That's one of his security teams. They've been following us since you left school. What about the silver car at the corner? That one belongs to Charles. Elena's voice hardened. He's not as subtle as your grandfather. Tommy clutched his backpack tighter. Are we still going? To the old records room? Not yet. First, we need to understand exactly what your mother found there. Elena turned down a side street, losing both tails with practiced ease. Jake's been digging into the East Austin development projects. People lost their homes, Tommy. Fires that were ruled accidental, property values that mysteriously plummeted right before Martinez Energy made offers. Mom's journal mentioned fires. Tommy pulled out the worn book, flipping to a dog-eared page. Look, she drew this house over and over from different angles. And there's that star mark again, like on the filing cabinet. Elena pulled into her garage, closing the door before anyone could spot them. Your mother was building a case, documenting everything, but she needed proof, something concrete that couldn't be buried or explained away. The USB drive? Tommy said. But why hide it in the records room? Why not take it to the police? Because she needed someone specific to find it. Elena led him inside, where Jake was waiting with fresh research spread across the kitchen table. Someone who would understand what it meant and have the power to act on it. Grandfather, Tommy whispered, the pieces clicking into place. She hit it where it all began, where she first discovered something wrong. She knew eventually someone would look for answers about her death and lead him right to the evidence, Elena finished. But Charles figured it out too. That's why he's so desperate to find you. As long as you're alive, that trust fund and the voting rights that come with it aren't his. Tommy picked up his sketchbook, opening to his latest drawing. Then, we need to find that drive before he does, and I think I know exactly where Mom hid it. The storage unit smelled of dust and forgotten things. Elena held her flashlight steady as Tommy worked the combination lock, his mother's birthday, then his own. Inside, stacked neatly against the wall, were the last pieces of Maria Martinez's life that hadn't fit in a backpack, paintings, boxes of art supplies, and a small filing cabinet. Mom paid for this place 2 years in advance, Tommy said, kneeling before the cabinet. Made me memorize the location, the code, everything. Said it was our insurance policy. The key around his neck fit perfectly. Inside, they found dozens of letters, each dated and sealed, arranged chronologically. Elena picked up the earliest one, postmarked 6 months before Maria's death. Dear Dad, she read aloud, by the time you read this, I'll either have come forward with the truth or something will have happened to me. If it's the latter, then everything you need to know is hidden where my conscience first awoke, in the place where a teenage intern learned that power without compassion is the deadliest poison. Tommy pulled out another letter, this one addressed to him. His hands trembled as he opened it. My darling boy, if you're reading this, then Elena found you, just as I prayed she would. Trust her. She's one of the few people who chose right over easy all those years ago. Elena continued reading. Her letter, the evidence is in the old records room, Dad, but it's not just in one place. I learned from you, never keep all your assets in one account. The USB drive is only part of the puzzle. Charles thinks if he finds it, he's safe. He doesn't know about the rest. There's more, Tommy said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. Inside were photographs, dozens of them showing abandoned houses, displaced families, and suspicious men in expensive suits. Each photo had a date and location carefully noted on the back. Your mother was building a case, Elena realized. These aren't just random incidents. She was tracking a pattern. Jake, who had been keeping watch at the storage unit's entrance, joined them. Boss, you need to see this. He handed Elena his tablet, showing a news article from 2016. Remember those fires in East Austin? The ones that convinced people to sell their homes cheap? Look who handled the insurance claims. Elena's eyes narrowed. Martinez Insurance Holdings, a subsidiary company headed by Charles Martinez. Mom has a whole section about that company, Tommy said, pulling out more papers. Look, she traced payments from shell corporations, all leading back to the same source. But there's something missing. She keeps referencing a ledger, something from the old records room. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from her contact at Martinez Energy. The board meeting's been moved up tomorrow morning. Charles is trying to force a vote on the East Austin Development Project before Ricardo can stop it. We need to get into that records room tonight, Tommy said, his jaw set in a way that reminded Elena startlingly of his grandfather. It's too dangerous. The building security has a gap between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. during shift change, Tommy finished. Mom wrote about it in her journal. She used to stay late sometimes when she was interning, said the night guards always took their coffee break together in the security office. Elena and Jake exchanged looks. Kid's done his homework, Jake said admiringly. Just like his mother, Elena murmured. She picked up another letter, this one addressed to the investigators. Inside was a detailed map of the basement level with ventilation shafts and emergency exits marked in red. She thought of everything, Tommy whispered, pride and grief. Mixing in his voice, almost everything. Elena held up a final letter, sealed and marked, "Read this last." Inside was a single photograph, Maria, much younger, standing beside a man whose face had been carefully torn away. But in the background, clearly visible, was a distinctive watch. Elena had seen that same watch earlier today, on Charles Martinez's wrist. That's not the original photo, Jake said suddenly. Look at the paper quality. This is a copy. The original would be with whatever else she hid, Tommy finished. The complete photo, showing the face of whoever else was involved. Elena checked her watch. It's nearly midnight. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast. Charles won't wait once. He realizes we've found the storage unit. As if on cue, Jake's phone chimed with an alert. Security cameras just picked up 3 SUVs leaving Martinez Energy, heading this way. They worked quickly, gathering the most crucial documents. Tommy took one last look at the storage unit that held his mother's final messages. She knew, he said softly. She knew they'd come for her eventually. That's why she prepared all this. She did more than prepare, Elena said, holding up Maria's final letter to her father. She left a trail so clear that even Charles couldn't completely erase it. Now come on, we've got a records room to break into. As they drove through the dark Austin streets, Tommy clutched his mother's journal to his chest. Inside were not just her words, but her weapons, truth, carefully documented and preserved, waiting for the right moment to emerge into the light. The Martinez Energy building looked different at night. Tommy stood in the shadows across the street, studying the place that had shaped so much of his fate before he was even born. The glass tower reached into the dark sky like a giant mirror, reflecting the city lights and his own uncertain future. Second thoughts? Elena asked softly, checking her watch. 1:45 a.m. Tommy shook his head. Mom used to tell me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you're terrified. He pulled out his sketchbook, opening it to the detailed drawing of the basement level. The maintenance entrance is here, behind the loading dock. Jake emerged from his surveillance position, keeping his voice low. Security rotation starts in 10 minutes, but we've got another problem. He showed them his tablet, displaying camera feeds from around the building. Charles is still in his office, 39th floor. He knows we found the storage unit, Elena said grimly. He's waiting to see what we do next. Tommy studied the security footage, something nagging at his memory. Mom's journal mentioned a service elevator, one that isn't on the main building plans. He flipped through his sketchbook until he found the right page. Here, it was installed during the original construction, before the digital systems. She said the old-timers called it the ghost elevator because it didn't show up on any modern controls. Elena's eyes lit up. Of course, the original builders would have needed a way to move materials before the main elevators were installed. Jake? On it. Jake's fingers flew across his tablet, pulling up the original construction blueprints from the city archives. Got it. Service shaft on the west side, runs all the way from basement to roof. Manual operation only. That's our way in, Elena decided. But Tommy, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Tommy's voice was quiet but firm. Mom died protecting this truth. I need to help finish what she started." They moved through the shadows to the west side of the building, where decades-old service doors blended seamlessly into the modern architecture. Jake made quick work of the electronic lock, and they slipped inside. The service shaft was a narrow concrete tunnel lit only by emergency lights that cast everything in a red glow. Tommy felt his heart pounding as they descended the metal stairs, each step echoing, despite their best efforts to move silently. At the basement level, Tommy paused. This far underground, the air felt thick with secrets. His mother had walked these halls 8 years ago, uncovering truth that would eventually cost her life. Now here he was, following in her footsteps. The records room was exactly as she'd drawn it. Rows of metal filing cabinets stretching into the shadows, decades of corporate history gathering dust. Tommy moved instinctively to the cabinet he'd seen so many times in his mother's sketches, the one with the tiny star scratched in its corner. "It's not just about the USB drive," he whispered, running his fingers over the star. "Mom said the truth is never in just one place. She would have left pieces of the puzzle spread out," Elena finished, "like a trail of breadcrumbs. Charles has been so focused on finding one piece of evidence, he missed the bigger picture." Tommy pulled out his mother's journal, comparing the sketches to their surroundings. "Look, in every drawing of this room, she included these 3 cabinets, always from slightly different angles, but always these 3. Jake kept watch at the door while Elena and Tommy examined the marked cabinets. Inside, they found hundreds of files, seemingly random, until Tommy noticed the pattern. "These are all from the East Austin project, but they're the original documents, before the digital copies were altered." Elena quickly photographed each page with her phone. Property, assessments, environmental impact studies, all showing the real data before Charles's team doctored them. "But where's the USB drive?" Jake whispered urgently. "We've got 15 minutes before the next security sweep." Tommy closed his eyes, thinking. His mother's voice seemed to whisper. In his memory, sometimes the best hiding place is right where everyone can see it. His eyes snapped open. The star! He ran his fingers over the scratched marking, feeling its edges. It's not just a marker, it's a guide. Pressing firmly, he felt a slight click. A false bottom dropped down, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a USB drive, an unmarked envelope, and a single key, older and heavier than the others. Elena quickly secured the drive while Tommy opened the envelope. Inside was the original photograph from the storage unit, unaltered this time. Tommy's breath caught as he finally saw the face of the man standing beside his young mother. It wasn't Charles. The man wore an expensive suit and a distinctive watch. But his face belonged to someone else, someone whose portrait Tommy had seen hanging in the Martinez Energy lobby. "Richard Kane," Elena breathed, "the company's former chief counsel, the man who supposedly died in a car accident right after Maria left." "My father," Tommy whispered, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. That's why she ran, not just because of what she found, but because... A sudden noise from above made them all freeze. Footsteps, moving with purpose. "Someone's coming," Jake warned. "Multiple people." Elena quickly photographed the picture before returning everything to its hiding place. "Time to go." But as they turned to leave, Tommy caught movement at the far end of the room, a shadow that shouldn't have been there, cast by someone who had been waiting in the darkness all along. "I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out." Sophia Martinez stepped from the shadows, her heels clicking softly on the concrete floor. "Maria always said you had her artist's eye for detail, Tommy." Elena pushed Tommy behind her, while Jake moved to block the main exit. But Sophia raised her hands, showing they were empty. "I'm not here for Charles. I've been waiting for you." "Why should we trust you?" Elena demanded. "Because I'm the one who helped Maria set up the storage unit," Sophia replied, pulling out an identical key to the one they'd just found. "And because I'm the only one who knows what really happened to Richard Kane the night he died." More footsteps echoed from above. Sophia gestured urgently toward a hidden alcove behind the last row of cabinets. "Charles and his security team are coming. Unless you want to explain what you're doing here at 2 a.m., I suggest you listen quickly." They ducked into the alcove, Tommy's heart pounding as the footsteps grew closer. Sophia spoke in rapid whispers. Richard discovered the corruption first. He and Maria were gathering evidence together, planning to take it to the SEC, but Charles found out. The car accident, Tommy breathed. It wasn't an accident at all. Sophia's eyes glistened. Your father was a good man, Tommy. He and Maria were going to expose everything, the fraud, the forced evictions, the environmental cover-ups. Charles couldn't let that happen. The night Richard died, he was coming to tell Maria they had enough evidence. He never made it. The basement door slammed open. Flashlight beams swept the rows of cabinets as Charles's voice rang out. Search everything. They have to be here somewhere. There's another way out, Sophia whispered, pressing a key into Tommy's hand. Service tunnel leads to the parking garage. But you need to know, the USB drive isn't the only copy. Maria gave me one. 2 for safekeeping. Tomorrow at the board meeting, Charles is going to learn that some secrets don't stay buried. Elena gripped Sophia's arm. You've been building a case all this time. 8 years of careful documentation. Every illegal deal, every shell company, every accident that cleared the way for Charles's projects. Sophia's face hardened. He killed my best friend's husband, and then poisoned her when she got too close to exposing him. I've been waiting for this moment since the day Maria died. The flashlights were getting closer. Sophia straightened up. I'll distract them, get Tommy out of here, and Elena, she pressed a business card into Elena's hand. That's the number. For the FBI's white-collar crime division. Agent Marcus is expecting your call. Before they could stop her, Sophia stepped out into the open. Charles, what are you doing down here at this hour? Sophia? Charles's voice carried a mix of surprise and suspicion. I could ask you the same thing. Really? The chief legal counsel checking corporate records before a major board meeting? That's hardly suspicious. Your armed security team searching the basement in the middle of the night. On the other hand, Tommy, Elena, and Jake crept toward the service tunnel as Sophia kept talking, her voice deliberately pitched to echo through the room. In fact, I was just reviewing some interesting documents about the East Austin development. Things that might interest the board tomorrow. The board meeting's been canceled, Charles snapped. Actually, it hasn't. Uncle Ricardo was quite clear. Full attendance required, no exceptions. In fact, he specifically mentioned wanting to discuss the Richard Kane investigation. Even from their hiding spot, they could hear Charles's sharp intake of breath. That case was closed years ago. Was it? That's not what the new evidence suggests. Sophia's voice grew fainter as she presumably led Charles and his team away from the service tunnel. Why don't we discuss it in your office? Once the footsteps faded, Elena guided them to the tunnel entrance. The key Sophia had given them worked perfectly. As they hurried through the narrow passage, Tommy clutched the photograph of his parents, his mind racing with revelations. We need to get somewhere safe, Elena said as they emerged into the parking garage. Charles won't waste time once he realizes Sophia's playing him. My grandfather's house, Tommy said suddenly. That's where Sophia's going to take the evidence. That's why she wanted us to know about the FBI. She's making her move tomorrow, at the board meeting. Jake was already on his phone checking police channels. Multiple vehicles leaving Martinez Energy heading downtown. They're splitting up to search the city. They'll check your apartment first, Tommy told Elena. Then the cemetery, the storage unit. Good thing we're not going to any of those places. Elena's voice was grim as she started her car. Your mother left one last safe house, one not even Charles knows about. The place where she and your father first discovered the truth. Tommy pulled out his mother's journal, finding the last entry. There, in her careful handwriting, was an address he'd never seen before. Below it, she'd written, where it all began and where the truth will finally end. As they drove through the dark streets of Austin, Tommy watched the Martinez Energy building recede in the side mirror. Somewhere in that gleaming tower of glass and steel, Sophia Martinez was setting the final pieces of his mother's plan into motion. Tomorrow, everything would change, but first, they had to survive the night. The safe house turned out to be a small art studio on the outskirts of Austin, tucked away in an industrial district of abandoned warehouses. Elena's headlights illuminated a faded sign, Kane Studios, Art Restoration. Behind the dusty windows, easels stood like silent sentinels in the darkness. "Your father's place," Elena said softly as they pulled into the hidden parking area behind the building. "This is where he and your mother first met." Tommy's hand trembled as he touched the door handle. "She never told me. She always said." "They met at Martinez Energy?" Officially they did. Jake was scanning the perimeter with practiced eyes. But Richard Kane had a secret passion for art restoration. He funded this studio to help struggling artists. That's how he really met Maria. Inside, the studio was a time capsule. Drop cloth still covered half-finished paintings, and the air smelled of old oils and turpentine. Tommy moved through the space in a daze, touching easels, examining brushes. That might have once been held by either of his parents. Elena found the hidden switch exactly where Maria's journal had indicated. A section of wooden flooring lifted smoothly, revealing a small but well-equipped panic room. "Your father was thorough," she said, checking the supplies. "Generator, water, enough food for weeks. He planned for everything." "Not everything," Tommy said quietly. He was standing before a large canvas, carefully removing the dust cover. Beneath it was an unfinished portrait, Maria younger and laughing, while a man's figure was roughly sketched beside her. Only the hand holding the paintbrush was complete, wearing the distinctive watch that had become such a crucial clue. Jake's phone buzzed. "Sophia's signal. She's safe, and the evidence is secure. But Charles's teams are searching methodically through the city. We need to lock down." They sealed themselves in the panic room just as distant sirens began to wail. Through the sophisticated security system, they could monitor the surrounding streets via hidden cameras. 3 black SUVs cruised past the studio without slowing, Charles's men searching grid by grid. "Look at this," Elena said, examining the panic room's contents. She'd found a leather briefcase, its surface cracked with age. Inside were more documents, these dating back to when Richard Kane first discovered the corruption. "Project Phoenix," Tommy read from one of the files. "What's that?" "The original name for the East Austin development," Elena explained. "Your father found irregularities in the environmental impact studies. Toxic waste beneath the proposed construction sites, deliberately hidden from federal inspectors. Charles wanted to build luxury condos on poisoned ground?" Jake asked, disgusted. "Worse," Elena continued reading. "The toxins would have seeped into the aquifer, contaminating water supplies across East Austin. Predominantly poor neighborhoods, minorities, people without the resources to fight back." Tommy pulled out his mother's journal, finding the pages where she'd documented similar patterns. That's why she drew those houses over and over. She was tracking the spread of the contamination. A sudden noise above made them all freeze. Footsteps moved across the studio floor, too deliberate to be random searchers. "They found us," Jake whispered, reaching for his phone, but Tommy held up his hand, listening intently. "No, that pattern of steps. Mom wrote about it. 3 short, 1 long pause, repeat. It's Sophia." Elena checked the security feed, then nodded. They opened the panic room to find Sophia looking exhausted, but triumphant. "It's done," she said, without preamble. "I've transferred everything to Agent Marcus. The FBI is moving on Charles's home and office right now." She turned to Tommy. "Your grandfather knows you're here. He's the one who told me where to find you." "How?" Tommy asked. Sophia smiled sadly. "Because this is where he found your mother's letter. The one explaining everything about you, about Richard, about what they discovered. She left it here the day before she died, knowing this was the one place Charles would never think to look. But why didn't my grandfather come forward? Then?" Tommy's voice cracked. "Why let me sleep in a cemetery for 8 months?" "Because Maria's letter warned him not to," Sophia explained. She knew Charles would panic if Ricardo suddenly started investigating the old cases. She needed time for the evidence to build, for all the pieces to come together, including you. Tommy, you were the final piece, the heir who could legally challenge Charles' control of the company. Elena's phone lit up with breaking news alerts. FBI raids, Martinez Energy, corporate fraud allegations. environmental crimes. Charles's men will be desperate now, Sophia warned. We need to get Tommy somewhere secure until the arrests are complete. No, Tommy said firmly. We need to go to Martinez Energy. The board meeting starts in 4 hours, and there's something we need from the records room first. Tommy, it's too dangerous, Elena protested. But Tommy was already pulling out his sketchbook, turning to the detailed drawings of the records room. Mom and Dad didn't just leave evidence of crimes. They left proof of their love, their dreams. For me, that last key we found? It's not for a filing cabinet. He pointed to his mother's final sketch, a small wall safe hidden behind the room's oldest cabinet. It's for that. Sophia's eyes widened in recognition. Richard's safe. The one even Charles never found. The one containing everything my parents wanted me to have, Tommy said quietly, including the truth about who I really am. Dawn was breaking over Austin as they made their plans. In a few hours, the Martinez Energy building would become the center of a federal investigation. But somewhere in its basement, a hidden safe held answers that no FBI agent was looking for. The real legacy that Richard Kane and Maria Martinez had left for their son. The Martinez Energy lobby was chaos. FBI agents moved efficiently through the space, boxing documents and escorting employees from the building. Tommy and Elena slipped in through the service entrance, using the confusion as cover. Sophia had gone ahead to the boardroom where Ricardo Martinez Sr. was about to make the announcement that would change everything. Charles is still in his office, Jake reported through their earpieces. He was monitoring the security feeds from Elena's car. He's destroying documents. Let him, Elena said grimly. The FBI already has copies of everything. He's only proving his guilt. They reached the basement undetected. The records room felt different in the harsh morning light streaming through the high windows. Tommy moved purposefully to the cabinet his mother had marked, the one concealing the hidden safe. Someone's been here, he said, noticing subtle signs of disturbance. Recently, Elena examined the floor. Scuff marks, multiple people. She pointed to dark smudges on the cabinet's surface. They were looking for something, but didn't know exactly where. Tommy pulled out his mother's journal one last time, comparing the drawings to the cabinet's position. With careful precision, he pressed the hidden latches in the sequence shown in the sketch. The cabinet's false back swung open silently. The safe was exactly as his mother had drawn it, small, old, but built to last. Tommy's hand shook as he inserted the key they'd found earlier. It turned with a solid click. Inside lay a thick envelope and a small wooden box. The envelope contained documents, his father's original will, papers establishing a trust in Tommy's name separate from the Martinez fortune, and a letter addressed to our son, Tommy. Elena's warning came just as footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Heavy, angry footsteps. Charles Martinez burst into the records room, his expensive suit disheveled, his face contorted with rage. 2 security guards flanked him, hands hovering near their weapons. "Give me the drive," he snarled. "It's over, Charles," Elena said calmly, positioning herself between him and Tommy. "The FBI has everything, Sophia's testimony, the environmental reports, the shell companies. All of it? You think I care about that?" Charles laughed bitterly. "Those crimes are years old. Statute of limitations, reasonable doubt. My lawyers will tie it up for decades. But that drive," his eyes fixed on Tommy. "Your mother's little insurance policy, that has something much more recent. Something I can't allow anyone to see." Tommy clutched the wooden box from the safe. "Like proof that you poisoned her?" Charles's face went still. "What did you say?" Mom wrote it all down. "How you visited her at the diner, insisted on buying her coffee. How the headache started right after. She even kept the cup." Tommy's voice shook with controlled fury. "She knew you'd killed my father. So she was ready when you came for her. She saved that cup, had it tested. The results are on the drive." "Sophia has a copy," Elena added. "She's sharing it with the board right now. Murder has no statute of limitations, Charles." Charles pulled, a gun pointing it steadily at Tommy. "Give me the drive and the test results now, or what?" Tommy's voice was eerily calm. You'll kill me too? Add another murder to the charges? You're just like your mother, Charles spat. Self-righteous, naive, thinking the world runs on justice and fairy tales. Your father was the same way, such a perfect pair of idealists. Do you know what your father said right before his brakes failed? He actually tried to appeal to my conscience. Keep talking, Elena said softly, her hand moving slowly toward her phone, but Tommy stepped forward, holding out the wooden box. You want to know what's in here, Uncle Charles? The real evidence? Charles gestured with the gun. Open it, slowly. Tommy lifted the lid. Inside was a single photograph and a small recording device. The photo showed Charles in Maria's apartment. The day she died, his reflection captured in her mirror as he added something to her glass of water. Mom had a security camera, Tommy said. Dad installed it years ago, hidden in her bookshelf. She activated it the day you came to visit. The recording's right here. Every word you said about the contaminated sites, about Dad's murder, about the money you'd stolen. You were so proud of yourself, so sure she was too sick to fight back, you couldn't help bragging. The color drained from Charles's face as Tommy pressed play. His own voice filled the room. Your precious Richard thought he could stop progress with his environmental concerns. As if a few poisoned wells matter compared to billions in development deals. He had to go. Maria, just like you do now. Drop the gun, Charles. Ricardo Martinez Sr. stood in the doorway, FBI agents on either side of him. He looked older than his photos, grief and anger etched deep in his face. How long have you been there? Charles whispered. Long enough to hear you confess to killing my daughter and her husband. Ricardo's voice was ice. Long enough to understand exactly why Maria ran from her own family. She wasn't running from wealth or responsibility. She was running from the poison you brought into our company. The FBI agents moved forward, weapons drawn. Charles Martinez, you're under arrest for the murders of Richard Kane and Maria Martinez. As they led Charles away, Tommy finally opened his parents' letter. His mother's elegant handwriting flowed across the page. My dearest Tommy, if you're reading this, then you've already proven you have your father's courage and my determination. The truth you've uncovered isn't just about crimes and corruption. It's about love. Your father and I chose truth over safety, justice over wealth, love over power. Now that legacy belongs to you. We know you'll use it wisely. Ricardo stepped forward hesitantly. Tommy, I know I have no right to ask, but Tommy looked up at his grandfather, seeing the same grief and determination he felt in his own heart. Mom wrote about you too, he said quietly. She never stopped loving you. She just needed you to see the truth for yourself. Outside, the morning sun painted the Austin skyline in shades of gold and promise. A new day was dawning for the Martinez. Family, built not on secrets and corruption, but on the foundation of truth that Maria and Richard had died protecting. A week after Charles's arrest, Tommy stood in his mother's old art studio, running his fingers over dried paint palettes and well-worn brushes. The space had been sealed since her death, preserved exactly as she'd left it. Canvases lined the walls, landscapes, portraits, and abstract pieces that told the story of her life after leaving the Martinez fortune behind. She taught classes here, Elena said softly, watching Tommy explore. Free lessons for neighborhood kids. Your grandfather's been paying the rent all this time, though he didn't know why he couldn't bring himself to clear it out. The morning light streamed through the dusty windows, illuminating particles that danced in the air like scattered stars. Tommy moved to a large canvas covered with a paint-splattered cloth. His hands trembled as he pulled it away, revealing an unfinished portrait of himself as a younger child, laughing as he held up a drawing. I remember this day, he whispered. I just won my first art competition at school. Mom was so proud. Ricardo Martinez stood in the doorway looking uncertain. In the days since Charles's confession, he'd been trying to bridge the 8-year gap between himself and his grandson, moving carefully, respecting boundaries. She was talented, he said quietly. I have one of her paintings in my office. A sunset over Lady Bird Lake. I never took it down, even after he cleared his throat, even after she left. Tommy moved to a filing cabinet in the corner, opening drawers filled with sketches and studies. "Look at these dates," he said, showing Elena. She was still working, still teaching, right up until Charles poisoned her, Ricardo finished, his voice hard. The FBI found the toxicology reports she'd hidden, slow-acting poison in her coffee designed to look like natural illness. He'd used the same method on others who threatened to expose him. But he didn't count on Mom documenting everything. Tommy pulled out more drawings, detailed sketches of Charles at the diner, notes about his suspicious behavior, dates and times meticulously recorded in the margins. She turned her artist's eye into a weapon. Sophia appeared behind Ricardo, carrying a large portfolio. "Found this in the storage room. You need to see it, Tommy." Inside were dozens of drawings of Tommy throughout his childhood, playing, reading, drawing, sleeping. Each one captured a moment of innocent joy, preserved through his mother's loving gaze. But there was more. Behind the drawings were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Ricardo. "She wrote to you every week," Tommy realized, looking at his grandfather. "Even if she never sent them." Ricardo nodded, his eyes bright with tears. "Telling me about you, your first words, your first steps, your growing talent for art. She wanted me to know you, even if she couldn't risk letting Charles discover where you were." Tommy sat at his mother's old drafting table, absorbing the weight of these revelations. His fingers found familiar grooves in the wood where she'd rested her hands year after year, creating beauty even as she fought to protect him from ugliness. "There's something else," Sophia said, producing a large envelope. "The board met this morning. In light of Charles's arrest and the evidence Maria left behind, they voted to restructure the company's leadership. The environmental division will be headed by a team of independent scientists," Ricardo explained. "All development projects will undergo rigorous testing. The East Austin sites will be cleaned up and the displaced families compensated. And this," Sophia added, placing a document before Tommy, "is the paperwork to establish the Maria Martinez Foundation for Arts Education, fully funded, with you as the director when you're ready." Tommy stared at the papers, seeing his mother's dream taking shape. She'd always wanted art to be accessible to everyone, regardless of wealth or status. "There's no pressure," Helena said quickly. "You're only 8. This can wait until you're older, until you decide what you want." But Tommy was already reaching for a pencil, not to sign anything, but to draw. Quick, sure strokes captured his mother's studio as it was now, filled with morning light and possibility. In the margins, he added small figures, children at easels, learning to see the world through art's transformative lens. "Mom always said that art tells the truth in ways words can't," he said, adding details to his sketch. "That's why she documented everything in drawings. The evidence, the corruption, but also the beauty, the hope." Ricardo moved closer, watching his grandson work with the same focused intensity Maria had possessed. "She'd be proud of you, Tommy, not just for helping expose Charles, but for understanding why she fought so hard. It was never about the money or the company. It was about doing what's right." Tommy added one final touch to his drawing, a small figure of his mother standing in the doorway, paintbrush in hand, watching over her legacy. "I want to reopen the studio," he said firmly, "not just for the foundation, but for now. Kids in the neighborhood shouldn't have to wait for art classes just because," he swallowed hard, "just because Mom can't teach them anymore." Elena shared a look with Ricardo, who nodded imperceptibly. "I think that can be arranged," she said. "In fact, I know some of your mother's former students who'd be honored to help." As if in response, a breeze stirred through the studio, carrying the familiar sense of paint and possibility. On the walls, Maria's paintings seemed to glow in the morning light, each one a testament to the power of truth and beauty to overcome darkness. Tommy picked up one of his mother's brushes, feeling its weight, its history, its promise. "When can we start?" The Martinez mansion felt like a museum to Tommy as he walked its halls for the first time. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow shadows on marble floors, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors watched his progress. His small backpack, containing everything he owned, felt out of place among such grandeur. "Your mother's room is exactly as she left it," Ricardo said softly, pausing before a door at the end of the hall. "I never could bring myself to change anything." Tommy hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. Elena stood quietly behind him, offering silent support. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a teenager's sanctuary frozen in time. Easels stood in one corner, paintbrushes still arranged in perfect order. Half-finished canvases lined the walls, showing the evolution of Maria's style. A guitar rested on a stand, sheet music open to a song Tommy recognized. His mother had sung it to him as a lullaby. She was 17 when she painted that, Ricardo said, pointing to a large canvas showing the Austin skyline at dawn. "I won first place in a national competition, but she was more proud of the children's art program she started at the community center." Tommy moved to the desk, where teenage Maria's journal lay open, its pages filled with sketches and dreams. "She wanted to open a free art school," he said, recognizing his mother's handwriting. "Something for kids who couldn't afford lessons." "And now you'll make that dream reality," Sophia said from the doorway. She carried a stack of legal documents. "The foundation paperwork is complete. The board unanimously approved the funding." But Tommy was distracted by something else, a photograph tucked into the journal's pages. It showed his mother and father at what looked like a community art show, surrounded by children's paintings. They were both laughing, unaware of the camera, completely absorbed in each other and the art around them. "That was the day they told me about their relationship," Ricardo said, his voice heavy with regret. "I was less than supportive. Richard was brilliant, ethical, everything I should have wanted for Maria, but he was already investigating irregularities in the company's dealings. I worried about scandal, about the family name." He shook his head. "I should have worried more about doing what was right." "It's not too late," Tommy said quietly, surprising them all. "Mom kept writing to you, kept believing you'd understand eventually, and now," he gestured to the room, to the preserved memories of his mother's youth. "Now you do." Elena stepped forward. "Tommy, we need to discuss arrangements. Your grandfather wants you to live here, but after everything that's happened, the choice has to be yours." Tommy looked around the room that had been his mother's sanctuary, seeing echoes of her everywhere. The same easels he'd grown up using, the same passion for art that had shaped his life. But he also saw something new, a chance to bridge the gap between two worlds. "I want to split my time," he said firmly. "Here with grandfather, learning about the foundation and the company, but also at Mom's studio, teaching art like she did." He turned to Elena. "And I want you to stay involved. Mom trusted you to protect me. That doesn't end just because Charles is in jail." Ricardo nodded immediately. "Elena's position as your legal guardian remains unchanged. She'll have full access to the house, the company, everything. We do this as a team, or not at all." Sophia smiled. "Maria would approve. She always said true family is built on trust, not just blood." A commotion from downstairs drew their attention. Jake's voice carried up the grand staircase. "They're here." Tommy rushed to the window. A small crowd had gathered at the mansion's gates, familiar faces from his mother's art classes, children and parents from the community center, former students who'd heard about the foundation's launch. Word spreads. "Fast," Sophia observed. "They're not here for the foundation," Elena said softly. "They're here for Tommy." Maria's students never forgot her kindness when they heard her son was carrying on her work. Tommy was already heading downstairs, his artist's eye catching details his mother would have loved. The way morning light, painted shadows on the grand staircase, the hopeful faces pressed against the gate's iron bars, the mingling of two worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. Ricardo followed more slowly, watching as his grandson greeted each person by name, just as Maria would have done. There was healing in this moment, not just for Tommy, but for everyone touched by Maria's legacy of art and truth. "We'll need to renovate the garage," Tommy was saying excitedly. It's perfect for art classes until we can reopen Mom's studio. And the garden could host outdoor painting sessions. Elena caught Ricardo's eye. He has her gift for seeing possibility everywhere. And his father's determination to make those possibilities real, Ricardo agreed. The Martinez family's future is in good hands. As if to emphasize his point, Tommy had pulled out his sketchbook and was already drawing plans for the garage conversion, surrounded by eager children offering suggestions. In that moment, with morning sun streaming through stained glass windows and the sound of excited voices filling the once silent mansion, the past's sharp edges began to soften into something new and full of promise. Maria's room above stood as a testament to what had been lost. But down here, in the mixing of art and hope and possibility, her dream was finally taking root and growing into something even greater than she had imagined. The Martinez Energy Lobby had been transformed. Where corporate logos and stark modernism once dominated, art now filled every space. Children's paintings hung alongside professional works, each telling a story of healing and hope. At the center of it all stood Tommy's tribute to his mother, a series of paintings chronicling her journey from privileged heiress to passionate teacher, loving mother, and ultimately defender of truth. Ladies and gentlemen, Ricardo Martinez Sr. addressed the gathered crowd, his voice carrying through the packed lobby. Welcome to the opening of the Maria Martinez Memorial Gallery and the official launch of our Children's Art Initiative. Tommy stood beside his grandfather, wearing a suit that matched Ricardo's, but clutching his familiar sketchbook. Elena and Sophia flanked them protectively, while Jake monitored security with practiced ease. The past month had been a whirlwind of preparations, but tonight was about more than just art. My daughter believed that art reveals truth, Ricardo continued, his voice thick with emotion. She taught me that lesson through her life, her death, and the legacy she left behind. Tonight, we honor that legacy by transforming this building's lobby into a permanent, free art gallery for the community. The crowd applauded as Tommy stepped forward to cut the ribbon. But instead of using the ceremonial scissors, he pulled out his mother's old paintbrush, the one she'd used to teach him his first lessons. With a careful stroke, he painted a line connecting two pieces of the ribbon, binding them together just as art had bound together his two worlds. Cameras flashed as Ricardo placed a proud hand on Tommy's shoulder. The gesture was simple but profound, a public acknowledgement of family, of healing, of truth, finally prevailing over secrets. The exhibition itself told multiple stories. One wall featured the evidence drawings Maria had created, now accompanied by news clippings about Charles's arrest and the environmental cleanup of East Austin. Another showcased art from children in the newly established free classes, their work reflecting hope and renewal. But the heart of the exhibition was the central wall, where Tommy had recreated his mother's final unfinished painting. Using her sketches and his own memories, he'd completed the portrait of their family, Maria, Richard, and himself, surrounded by the art they loved. Above it hung the photograph from the hidden safe, now restored and framed, showing his parents in their studio, young and in love and full of dreams. "Your mother would be so proud," Elena said softly, watching Tommy greet guests with a poise that balanced perfectly between Martinez heir and artist's son. "She is proud," Tommy replied with quiet certainty. "I can feel it in every brushstroke." The evening brought a steady stream of visitors, business leaders making donations to the foundation, former students sharing stories about Maria's teaching, families from East Austin expressing gratitude for the cleanup efforts. But the most powerful moment came when Tommy led a group of young art students in a demonstration. "My mom always said that art isn't just about talent," he explained, helping a small girl hold her brush correctly. "It's about seeing the world with your heart as well as your eyes, about finding truth in unexpected places." Ricardo watched from nearby, seeing Maria's gentle teaching style living on in her son. The past months had taught him more about legacy than all his years building. His business empire. True wealth, he now understood, wasn't measured in dollars, but in lives touched, truths revealed, and beauty created. Sophia approached with news from the FBI. Charles's plea deal is finalized. He's given up everything, his overseas accounts, his shell companies, even his contacts in other corporations. The evidence Maria gathered was too comprehensive to fight. And the families? Ricardo asked. The compensation fund is set up. Every family displaced by the East Austin project will be made whole. Many of them are here tonight, actually. She gestured to a group admiring a collection of photographs documenting their neighborhood's history and planned restoration. As the evening drew to a close, Tommy stood before his mother's portrait, adding one final touch, his signature beside. Hers, a son completing his mother's last work. The brushstroke was confident, born of practice and purpose. "Ready for your speech?" Elena asked gently. Tommy nodded, approaching the podium as the crowd gathered. At 8 years old, he looked almost impossibly small before the sea of faces. But his voice was clear and strong. "My mother believed that art tells the stories we can't put into words," he began. When she discovered corruption, she fought it not just with evidence, but with drawings that showed the human cost of greed. When she wanted to teach children, she created spaces where creativity could flourish, regardless of wealth or status. And when she needed to leave a message that would outlast her, she left it in paintings and sketches that led us to the truth. He gestured to the gallery around them. "This space isn't just about displaying art. It's about continuing my mom's work. Every child who wants to learn will have a place here. Every story that needs telling will find its canvas, and every truth that needs revealing will find its light." Ricardo stepped forward then, his public apology unexpectedly raw and real. "I failed my daughter by choosing reputation over justice, but through her son, through this foundation, and through the changes we're making at Martinez Energy, we honor her vision of what this company could be, not just profitable, but principled, not just powerful, but purposeful." As night fell over Austin, the Martinez Energy building glowed like a beacon. Through its windows, art and justice and family had finally found their harmony, painting a future bright with possibility. In the gallery, Tommy added one final sketch to his exhibition, a small drawing of the cemetery where he'd once slept, but now transformed. In his artist's vision, the cold marble had bloomed into a garden of hope, proving that even the darkest chapters could nurture something beautiful. 1 year later, Tommy stood before his mother's grave, but this time he wasn't alone. Elena, Ricardo, and Sophia stood with him, each holding a paintbrush and a small canvas. The headstone was no longer just a marker of loss. Flowers bloomed around it, and children's artwork decorated the nearby trees. "Ready?" Tommy asked, setting up his easel. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery, turning everything golden. Together, they began to paint. Each canvas captured a different perspective of the scene. Tommy's showed his mother's spirit in the dancing light between the trees. Ricardo's captured the strength of the marble angel watching over her daughter. Elena's depicted the path that had led them all here, and Sophia's illustrated the flowers breaking through the earth, representing truth's inevitable emergence. "Your mother's case inspired others to come forward," Sophia said as she worked. 3 more companies have been exposed for similar environmental crimes. The EPA is implementing new regulations based on her evidence. "And the art program has expanded to 5 new locations," Elena added, adding detail to her painting. "Over 200 children enrolled this semester alone." Ricardo stepped back from his canvas, studying his work. "The board voted yesterday. Martinez Energy is now Martinez Environmental Solutions. Our focus is completely shifted to sustainable development and cleanup technologies." Tommy finished his painting with a flourish, adding a small figure of himself sleeping beside the grave. But now the figure was surrounded by protective shadows shaped like wings. "Mom always said that endings are just beginnings in disguise." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder of children's artwork. bright, hopeful pieces created by students in the Foundation's classes. One by one, he laid them around the headstone, transforming the grave into a gallery of life and color. "She's not just a memory anymore," Tommy said softly. "She's a movement. Every child who learns to paint, every truth that gets told, every wrong that gets made right, that's Mom's legacy living on." As they gathered their art supplies, a group of children appeared at the cemetery gates, students from Tommy's Saturday morning class, come to share their latest works. Their laughter echoed through the peaceful grounds, chasing away the last shadows of grief. Tommy touched the headstone one final time, leaving behind his paintbrush, the same one his mother had once used to teach him his first lessons. He didn't need it anymore. He had his own brushes now, his own colors, his own truth to paint. Above them, a bright star winked in the morning sky, a last reminder that even in darkness, light finds a way to shine through.